And welcome to the Going Global, where opportunities are greatest session. We are looking forward to having an interactive session with all of you today. So whether you have already gone overseas and started business ventures abroad, or whether you're just considering it, we want this to be a valuable session for you today. And SIIA has helped assemble this expert group of panelists who are here to talk to you about their experience, as well as answer questions that I'll be sending to them, but also that will be coming from you. So without further ado, I'm going to get us started. And I'll start off by introducing myself. My name's Edie Perkins. I'm the VP of International Product Development at Scholastic. Scholastic is the world's largest publisher and distributor of children's books. We have worldwide distribution to over 160 countries. We have operations in 13 countries, an export business that sells to over 150 countries. We started our international business by setting up subsidiaries in major markets back in 1950s through the 60s. And right now, the international business makes up 20% of Scholastic's revenues and about 25% of the profits. And it is one of the fastest growing divisions. So that's where I come from, but it's really not about me, it's about our panelists. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike to introduce himself, and then everyone else can go on down the line.
Okay, great.
Give a microphone there. Is that on? Or you can use this. Oh, that's on.
Okay. I'm Mike Diaz. I currently handle marketing for a dissertations product line for ProQuest and a number of SaaS and service offerings. Formerly was with Gale in the U.S. Department of Commerce. ProQuest provides articles, ebooks, and primary sources to support higher education. And we have an international presence across 100 countries and territories in all of the regions of the world. We have local sales teams and distributors and dedicated regional marketing, customer service, and tech support. So,
okay. Okay, this format's slightly different the way I anticipated, so the slide deck should be interesting.
Wait, text.
Okay, so I'm Mark McCusker. I'm the Chief Executive of TextHub. We are based in Northern Ireland, and we design technologies that are designed to help people who struggle with reading and writing. And to some extent, in terms of, I think we're possibly the smallest company in the panel here. We have 115 employees. Our revenues are about $16 million. And if you regard international business as being anything outside of your home country, and if you define our home country as Northern Ireland, basically 100% of our revenue is global. We sell nothing at home. However, if you take a more realistic definition of it and say it's outside of perhaps the UK, it would be about 55% of our revenues are in international markets. We are backed by a firm of VCs since 1996, which, if anybody's been any exposure to VCs, would know that's very, very unusual. And, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a good thing, but it's an unusual thing. And, but basically, just to comment just briefly, we have 3 divisions, and I see the slide has already changed. Well done. 3 divisions. Our education division, basically, we sell technology largely into the schools, and we basically are selling to schools, colleges. North America is one of our bigger markets, the UK is one of our bigger markets. Anywhere, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa would be the main markets that we tend to sell into. An interesting type of business in that the ticket value varies from a few $100s to a few $100,000. So it's a very unusual remit to try and sell that type of thing. And you're always, of course, trying to get to the opposite end, the higher end of that scale. We have a second division, which is our speech services division. It basically sells technologies where it's all about adding value to web content. We target corporates and government with that. That business is a nice business. because it's annual recurring. The revenues are more typically lower, I think from $2,000 or $3,000 to maybe $70,000 or $80,000, but you've got a nice recurring revenue line on that. And we're in most of the European markets we're particularly active. And the final division is our publishing division, where we work with the likes of Pearson, McGraw-Hill, etc. And there is no typical ticket value for that. What we do is we add a value-added layer to publisher content. We reckon at any one time there's probably about 4 or 5 million pages of educational content that have got some aspect of our technology in there as well. So that's roughly what we do. And if you just move on one more. Actually, no, two more.
Two more, sorry.
They took them hours to put that slide deck together.
And I'm totally butchering it. Too much animation.
This deck that just shows you the countries where we are currently active. Roughly speaking, there are countries where we're doing more than about $10,000 revenue per annum. We choose $10,000 because it's kind of not accidental. You can pick up a few $1,000s here and there, doing virtually nothing. But these are ones where we're actually particularly active, trying to seek business. So that's roughly excellent.
All right, wait, we can
Simon
go back.
Good afternoon, I'm Kevin Mather. I'm the VP of International Business for Pasco Scientific, and we're located in California. We are one of a vanishing breed. We are actually a manufacturer located in the state of California. That is no small feat in the realities of business in California. We're focused on manufacturing hands-on science education equipment that really fall into two broad product lines. One is physics equipment, so all the traditional physics apparatus that you would see in a university or a high school physics laboratory. And then the other that's really been the driver of growth for our business, both domestically and internationally, is the technology line. Sensors that we can collect and analyze data, so we can measure your EKG or someone's heart rate or sound or light. We have been exporting for 35 plus years now, and we have partners, depending on how you want to count it, partners in 80 plus countries, and we have equipment installed in over 100 countries. A little bit north of 52% of our revenue is export driven. Not that I'm competitive about that, but so I'm actually very proud of the fact that we've been able to take it from a third of revenue to greater than 50% over the last few years. And we really focus on a channel distribution model, which is to work with our partners and to enable them to effectively be Pasco in their home market. The other thing I'll just simply say is that international business is a team sport, and you really have to focus on building a team that's going to tackle international business, because it's not just about sales, but it's about having people that understand CE requirements and RoHS requirements in the EU, and export regulations and documentation and packaging and shipping, and on and on and on. So it really is a complex team sport.
Hold on, we're going to get through the animation.
Animation, cool.
All right, Simon, over to you.
Good afternoon. My name's Simon Tyndall. I work for Steelcase Education Solutions, and I don't know if you can tell by my accent, I live in the UK, I live in London, and spend a great deal of my time actually flying around Europe as we take what is a strongly US-orientated company and bring that into the European market. So my role, can we go to the next slide? So essentially what Steelcase is doing is we are designing classrooms for 21st century learners. We are looking at how pedagogical changes interact with both technology and with space, and designing classrooms and layouts for libraries, for informal learning spaces as well, which are very different to what you see here. I mean, if you look at this, it's very much a traditional rows and columns type approach. This is not always the most conducive way that students are learning today. They learn in very different ways to how you or I learned 20, 30, 40 years ago. So that's what we're doing within Steelcase. Steelcase Education has been around for 5 or 6 years. within the organization, they've been focusing on higher education in the US. They've grown that to be just under $250 million business here in North America. And now we're rolling that out within the Europe, Middle East, African market.
Great, thank you all. I'd like to start off, well, first of all, when deciding to go global, there's so much opportunity and potential, and it seems like that could be such a great way to grow your business, but there are so many complexities to working internationally. So I'd like the first round of questions to be about how do you assess that opportunity? What are the criteria that you should be considering before making a decision to enter a new market? So Mike, if we could start with you.
Sure. I think that you want to look at the overall educational spending and the trend as a percent of the GDP, but it's also really important to understand where your products are likely to be able to play or not play in that particular market. So if you're a content provider, what subject areas are growing most quickly? Are there new institutions springing up? What are trends in terms of publication and R&D, and what does the infrastructure look like? Regulatory climate. So you need to look at the opportunity side of the equation, but you also need to understand the effort that's going to be required to play in that market, to localize your product, to localize your marketing and sales efforts, etc.
Great. Anyone else on the panel like to add to that?
I think that when you're looking at these things, the GDP stuff, absolutely look at that. You tend to look at spend per student, average classroom size, and lots of data like that you should be able to pick up. Not always accurate data. You have to try and verify that it's right, particularly when it comes from China. But the other thing we tend to look for, we look for legislative drivers. And these are going to be things that for us, we are moving into the English as a second language market, where we're specifically now starting to target non-English speaking countries. And there we're just looking for, is English mandated in the education system? In Brazil, for example, you can't really go to university unless you've got English. If you look at some of the Asian countries, basically it is now mandated English has to be taught from actually some of them from age 4 upwards. So some of this stuff is not really quantitative it's not a GDP number, but it is trend indicative, and it's important to do that type of research as well. And the other caution that I would say is that don't assume that just because you've got a product that works really well in the UK market, the same product localized is going to work in an overseas market. I was on a course recently, which clearly wasn't on PowerPoint, as you can tell, but it was on a course recently, and they presented a case study on Kodak. And Kodak famously had the first patent on a digital camera, but they actually missed the window of digital. And one of the assumptions that they made was that they could take their technologies, which was sort of old pre-digital camera technology, and they would be able to sell that to China. And that was going to be one of the growth markets by selling what was effectively end-of-cycle technology into the Chinese market. And of course that didn't work. The Chinese wanted the latest and the best. So it's a cautionary note, because we have been guilty of that. And you come back and somebody realizes, no, it's not right. They want the latest and they want the best. And it's very, very important not to make an assumption.
Simon or Kevin, anything?
I think the key thing is it's looking, pick up on your other comment, it's very much looking at what are the trends, both legislative, but also the business trends, effectively the business trends within education. And what I mean by that is if you look at government policy, there are some very defined aspects of government policy which will indicate where investment is going to be placed. Is that going to be placed in K to 5? Is it 6 to 12? Is it higher education? And it's equally, that is very much on a national as opposed to regional level. So every curriculum will be different. Every government policy and view of education will be slightly different. And it's how do you find the best fit for your product within that arena, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Any questions from the audience about how to assess the opportunity? No, okay. And then moving on to determining the approach. There are many approaches to entering a new market, from looking for JVs, finding partners, to setting up a branch or a business there. What are some of the ways that you have approached business in new markets?
I'll start on
We'll
that
let
one.
you start. Yeah.
Sure. So Pasco takes really a channel development approach to it, and the reason for that is that we're going for a high value add sales cycle. The sales cycle for our products, depending on whether it's at a Ministry of Education level or a university level, can be like all of us, 12 months, 18 months or longer. And so we're looking for a partner that understands that, can work within that, and provide the local support that they need. Also, often you have to have somebody that understands the local culture, the local politics, speaks the local language, and can navigate through all of that, and knows where the landmines are. So we're always looking for that local person that's already established within the education sector internationally.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think also the key in finding the right type of partner is it's always very tempting to go after the bigger distributor or the bigger dealer, whereas in fact you really want the person with the incentive to go and put the investment in your product to actually go and drive that opportunity. So it's less about being listed within a catalog. It's far, I think my tendency would be find a smaller partner who's well connected, but it has a very strong vision of which your product or your solution fits within that vision, because you will build a much more loyal relationship than just being listed under the national distributor.
And do you have any tips for once you've found that partner, how to make it a successful relationship and make sure that it'll move in the right direction?
Well, I mean, it's the same. I think it's, to a large extent, it's the same as having a partner in the US. It's very much about communication. It's very much about being quite clear, and equally, it's about offering incentive. Agreeing a plan where you're both putting some form of investment in, but you're both actually making profit and you're making benefit down. If it's very one-sided, like any business relationship, it's not going to be effective.
If I could just add that, I call it the mind share game, because these are independent businesses that we're dealing with, and so each day they have to get up and make a decision where they're going to invest their time and money, and we have to make it easier and more profitable to spend their time and money investing in Pasco than some other product line, and that's really about getting to know them and their motivations personally. I always say that in selling there's two things. You need to know what the person wants, and more importantly, why they want it. And let's give them what they want, and let's satisfy the emotional reason of why they want it. They want to build a business, they want to grow revenue. Why do they want to do it? It may be about kids going to school in a different country, or who knows what those reasons are. But it's about that relationship to where then you can build on that relationship when difficult challenges are going to come.
And do you have any suggestions for writing contracts, or how you make sure that things will go the way you want them to, and if they don't, how to extract yourself from that?
One of the things that I think you need to look very carefully at it on the front end, to the earlier point, is who else are they representing? Are there any potential conflicts, any potential issues that could crop up down the road based upon that? In many cases, you may have government mandated distribution channels for content. In other cases, you may have limited options in terms of who represents you, but you don't. I think you want to look very carefully before you jump into the relationship.
Yeah, can I maybe comment on that? I think a lot of this has got to do with factoring is what's your attitude to risk. and what risk are you prepared to take. If you, I'll take a step back. We have a general rule actually in our company that if you want to get revenues out of a country, you pretty well have to visit it 3 times and wait a year. That's sort of the level of effort it takes to get into it. But invariably, particularly in countries where English is not the first language, when we go into countries where English is the first language, we just refuse to talk about exclusivity. Just don't do it. And we find a way of doing it. But if you go into a country where English is not the first language, invariably the exclusivity question comes up. But we have a view that exclusivity actually in fact increases value of the company. But there are genuine reasons then. We've got this partner in a country who basically is going to put a fair bit of effort into to make your product work. And you have to find ways around that. And there are ways around that. So the sort of things that we have done in the past is, okay, we've done a special build, and it's actually the partners. You can do this in software. It may be more difficult, I think, with some of the other products that we're talking about. But in software, you can. So you do a special build that's specifically that partner branded, etc. And what you have, we have no, and that seems to satisfy them. So we don't do exclusive, or you give them exclusive prices that particular brand. And it means you can exit your way out of it. But the thing to remember about it is you don't actually want to. You want the thing to succeed. So, so it becomes a trust thing. It takes you back this whole thing about risk. We're prepared to take a risk. And so for us, when we went into China, a big issue for us was IP protection. How do you, and as we all know, the famous tales about, the fella getting on the plane and saw his software's already been replicated down in a local market. But I think if you think about that, and you try and put that into a contract, you're going to kill yourself. You're going to spend an awful lot of time and money on lawyer fees achieving very little. Whereas, as my chairman used to say to me, basically, if you think too much about that, you're focusing on the size of the hole and not the size of the donut. It's actually, that's very true. The reality is that you can be as clever as you like in terms of trying to protect software. And I think actually this is less of a problem these days now. There's an awful lot of stuff going to cloud and SaaS, and you can turn stuff off like that. So it's a lot easier. But I would say that you've got to assess your risk, and how you contract will reflect that risk. Ultimately, like I say, for a small company like us, if a contract breaks down, are we going to sue them? No. We don't have the resources for that.
Great, thank you. Question?
Do you think that we should do exclusives or we shouldn't do them?
We don't. We avoid doing exclusives, but the way it's a tough piece of negotiation. You need to find a solution to this. And the way that we do it is we'll make it, as I say, we make a bill specifically to that company. So it's no use to anybody else. It's no use to us. It's specifically of use to them. But effectively, if something does break down, we've always got the right to bring our own technologies in. That's our solution to it.
Yeah, what about the others, exclusive versus non-exclusive?
I think it's one of those, it depends. When we start with a new partner, like for example, we have a new partner in Russia right now called Polymedia, and they are a big animal. And they're not exclusive. We're going to, and we have a written contract with them. I like contracts from the perspective of clarifying who's going to do what to whom and when. But it's really about building the relationship, not having the signed document. So we'll go with somebody on a non-exclusive basis, typically for at least a year. And we really want to see performance, and we want to see that they're going to work for us. Part of the reason I want that non-exclusivity in that initial phase is because if it's not going to work, I want to exit quickly. But we've got a lot of partners where we've got 15, 20, 25 years with them, and so it's kind of that go cautiously, I wouldn't give exclusivity quickly, but when you look like you've got that long-term right match, and it's going to require a significant investment in marketing, localization, content development, then would go through exclusivity.
Yeah, a lot of times they're putting forth extra resources in terms of marketing, local trade shows, things like that. So if you get to the point where you've been not exclusive for a period of time, and it looks like the match in terms of what you're trying to accomplish and what they're trying to accomplish, then it makes sense, but not until then.
I know some companies will do, they'll have performance levels, usually expressed in revenues. Built into the contract such that the exclusivity is taken away to have it succeed. There are ways around it. It just needs a little bit of creativity.
Are there any questions in the audience about finding partners or establishing relationships with a new partner? Yes.
Mark, as the only member of the panel which is exporting into the United States, just talk a little bit about how you made the decision. And I mean, it's a big, messy market that those of us who live here can't figure out. So I'm just curious how you went through your thought process.
So it's a bit like the first line here is on my boss is, do you really want to do this? But it's difficult, you know. The reality is we came into the States in 1998, and I would say we weren't successful in the States until about 2002 or 2003. But there were a lot of things, our assessment of the marketplace, we saw certain things. We were originally very much in the SPED market, and there's strong SPED legislation at the time. There were strong funding lines coming in to support SPED. And there were a lot of similarities between the US and the UK market in that regard. The other thing which actually made it easier in those days, there was a well-trodden show circuit. That you only had to attend 6 or 7 shows, and that's it. You'd hit everybody. And on the scale of things, that's not that expensive to do. There were all sorts of issues about a brand not being recognized and all that, but you worry about this stuff, you know. Thanks, nothing. But the reality is, go to 6 shows and you'd hit everybody. And that was really but what was interesting was how we evolved. It's because we went through that thing, which everybody does, I think, whenever they're trying to get going, is that if anyone will sell your product, I'll take it. What you do then is you point to all these people. This is what we did. In hindsight, was a bit daft, but we did it. But what happens is you suddenly end up with all this network of resellers, but then you realize in actual fact they're restricting you, and you realize that and you do some sort of cull on the network. You do usually a Pareto 80-20. 80% of your revenues come from 20% of the channel. And what we actually realized was that we had completely the wrong type of reseller. And it was because that the resellers were interested in doing small deals that they could do turnover quickly, where no one was taking a 9-month deal about getting a statewide opportunity. So we actually switched to direct over a couple of years. And in those days, I would say we went from 80% channel to 20% direct, to now it's the other way around. 80% direct, 20% channel. But these things evolve.
Yes.
How do you find your right partners or your right distributors that, when you talk about people that understand the local cultures and the languages, but if you're here and they're there, do you hire them, do you use consultants, do you go through a middle company to pay them so they work for you?
So we have it as a resale agreement, but I'll tell you how I think the best method to go about finding a partner is personally. With all due respect for the Department of Commerce. The Gold Key service from the Department of Commerce can be a way to get you started if you've never done any export. I like to network with my colleagues that have compatible product lines, and so I know that there's a number of other companies within the engineering technical education market space, Feedback Instruments, Cousins, several of them. And I made a point of meeting and getting to know my counterparts, and I network with them. The other way you can do it is find out who your competitor's using in the market space, and then go try to knock off that person. If you do that, you give a little ding to your competitor, but you already know that there's somebody in that space, or you find out who their competitors are. I think that the networking is by far the most productive way.
Yeah, I think it's a relatively small, each country is a relatively small number of resellers that are focused on education. And so just finding contacts within that group is going to be very helpful, because people will guide you, customers and even other suppliers will guide you to people that you go and talk to. It's a fairly incestuous world, so people do talk and communicate quite well.
If you really start, what you're reflecting, I think, is you've been in business for a number of years as a vendor, but you've built up a network to some extent. You know where to go. If you're starting from scratch, you don't have that advantage. It's slightly different, but for us, basically, the likes of the UKTI, the consulates, basically, they will give you an initial service. All it is that. That's all you should take it for, but it's a start. And at least they usually have in-country resources. They've got some in-country resources that can do it. We use UKTI to do a thing called an OMAS survey. It costs £600, $1,000 there. And they will go in and basically take a look at the marketplace in the country that we're targeting, and give us just general feedback about who's playing in it, about potential channels. 90% of the report, no use to. But there's probably 10% in there that is the start of something. It's difficult, and it's much easier, I think, when you're established and you've done before. more difficult when you're doing it from scratch.
Great. So once you've mastered the challenge of finding the right partner, could each of you or most of you speak to us about some of the cultural or localization needs or some of the adaptations you've had to make and the challenges you've faced in that area? Let's start, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, I think once you have a good partner, it does make it a lot easier. But I think on the content side, you're often you may be confronted with legal oversight or legal restrictions on content. There are also cultural restrictions that come into play in terms of your product. Good example would be photographs or video or things like that. And of course, those things flow through to your marketing efforts and how you go to market as well. So most companies really underestimate the amount of localization that they're going to need to do.
Are there any specific examples that one of the others could speak about?
Of cultural differences?
Yeah, cultural or even getting into the legal differences.
Well, I'm not sure the legal is. I mean, there are individual countries that would have unique legal aspects, let's say. I think it's more a combination of business culture. I think you do have the advantage in Western Europe that a lot of the EU countries will have very similar, by virtue of being in the EU, will have very similar business cultures and very similar legal approaches, although there are always quirks and different aspects. I think the biggest aspect of localization is it's far more than just translation. So it's really around having, recognizing some of the most basic features, which is, it's highly likely that you will have local competition to your product if it's not, unless you have a very unique product. It is also very likely, for example, that particularly for something like educational content, that it is strongly aligned to the US national curriculum, which is not the same as any other. Individual nations will have individual curriculums and individual viewpoints. So, the biggest cultural challenge is if you look at your interpretation of, say, US history is very different to the interpretation of European history. And take it across Europe, there's always very big differences there as well. So it's really, I think if you have content which is more scientific or more maths orientated, there is an applicability, but be wary or understand the differences between the national curriculums, what is taught at what time within what age bands, because that may be how you have to shape that particular product.
In some cases, it really makes more sense to partner in a localized offering. I mean, you start, on the content side, you start to look at help files, you start to look at the depth of localization that's needed. Just to have a search box that allows local language is not going to be sufficient. So a lot of times, we had a situation with some Chinese papers where it made more sense to partner than to try to bring something into our platform.
We have a culture can mean a couple of things. Do you mean culture in the product sense, or do you mean culture in the selling sense?
I was hoping to get both out.
Right.
So
I'll do one of each.
Okay.
We actually, our UK stuff is all localized for the United States market. It's common language, but it's still different coming into the States.
Two nations divided by a common
Language,
language.
exactly. and so we're in some of the Saudi, so we've dictionaries, with all sorts of speaking dictionaries. They had to take the word sex out of the dictionary, which is fine for, there are all sorts of things like that. We create blacklists of words, and then there's just a different blacklist for each country that we have to go into. Cultural stuff is much more minute than you sometimes think. We had to change all the pictures in one of our products for the United States. This was actually, and because we'd all white people, It's like just picture design, but there was no bias. It just happened that way, and we wanted to bring a better cultural racial mix into the thing. So there's a lot to that. And in terms of selling, I get to talk about this till the colleagues come home, basically. But, one of the problems is when you're in a country where you don't know, you don't speak the language, so you've got a translator, and you're relying on that translator to actually tell you what's actually going on. And I was in pre-Text Hub. I was selling some stuff into Georgia, in Russia, and ended up with a thing called a Georgian round table. And the Georgian round table is where you've done your deal basically, and you sit around. In this case, there was 10 of us. And the first fellow stood up, basically, this was for dinner, stood up and did this toast, and then a shot of vodka, and everybody had to drink the vodka straight back, and you were just not a man if you didn't do this. And I thought, that's grand, I can do that. And then about 10 minutes later, the second lad stood up, and he did exactly the same thing, a different toast. And I said, oh, Jesus, there's 10 people at the table. And eventually it worked its way around, by which stage I was just a malignant mess. It was just, but it turned out that my translator, who actually loved Georgian round table, they said, I didn't have to go to this, but he thought it would be just a great idea. I was going to go anyway. But that was part of it. There is a thing, a lot of cultures, once the deal is done, there's a kind of a celebration thing happens afterwards, and you don't talk any business. It's just a bit of fun. Yeah. Be prepared for that.
I've survived that in Georgia and in Kazakhstan, and by far the most wounded I've ever been. But when you talk about the cultural stuff, it does really go across, and the localization across even product marketing. For example, when we do prepare catalogs and literature, and we try to think about the photos that are in, especially with females, that it's a long sleeve and it's a more conservative neckline on it, because otherwise the Saudis are going to get out the big black magic marker and be going through your literature, things like that. And then in the localization of it, don't underestimate the cost of localizing a product, especially software. Like with our software, Sparky software, we have an online help system, and so that will take, and we'll give that to the partner to let them do that. We'll do the UI, but you basically have just signed up to a multi-year liability and maintenance for that piece of code for every language that you translate, and those numbers rack up really quickly. So,
great, thank you. Any questions from the audience? No. And how would you go about evaluating success? What are some of the factors that you use to evaluate success?
Well, it's always the obvious one of money. Put that to one side. I think the key
another answer?
No, not really, just money. I think the key thing is that what I would say to that, so I've changed the question slightly and say you have to look at it over a time period, because it's not about, we've been, I was just reflecting on the comments here, and it sounds that we're getting lots of reasons not to do this. I mean, you've got to look at it, if you look at the US market and you compare that to a European market, then arguably just on population alone, the whole of Europe is double the size of North America. So you're really looking at huge opportunity there, but it does take an investment of both time and finance. So I would judge, I think you've got to look and say, you're not trying to make profit within the first year, you're not trying to make profit or significant profit from your first customers. Your first customers have to be investments. You have to, particularly, I think it's highly important that you have, for sort of your growth, you have to have local reference. You have to have local teachers and local customers willing to stand up and be representative. So use those as your reference to endorse the product. So I think you're really judging it over a 3 to 5 year time period, and then you judge it ultimately down on revenue and margin.
also look at, especially when you're bringing up a new partner or a new country, we look for the indicators as the partner attending trainings that we have, either in person or online. Are they buying demonstration kits? are they adapting content to their local market? When you travel to that country, are they getting the quality of meetings that you want? Because it does take sometimes, realistically, I figure that it's 24 months. It's 18 months to 2 years before a partner is actually up to speed and you can start to kind of expect revenue out of them. So I'm looking for all those other indicators to kind of measure progress in that first couple of years. And then ultimately after that, it's, you know, they're looking for
The
revenue.
obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think in turn, you know, you're looking at that partner relationship and investing in that partner relationship, but also are they helping to open new doors for you, right? What relationships, you know, are you getting, you know, through a few degrees of separation, right, that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to build, so.
I would tend to agree with the first comment. We're hopeless at this. We always underestimate how long it's going to take to get these to flow. We always do it. I don't know why you think we know that, but you do have to be realistic about that. I think, and after that, we don't have any hard and fast rules, but ultimately you're looking for the attitude. It's the attitude of the partner and what they're doing. And you can tell what they're doing. You can tell if they're constantly speaking back to your problems, and either you've got a piece of software that shouldn't be in the marketplace in the first place, or you've got a problem with the partner. And sometimes it's a hard. It could be you. You've got to take it. So I would say as much attitude, just in terms of how they interact with you. Do you have confidence that they're doing the right things?
Yeah, I mean, given the long time frames, one of the biggest challenges I think is sustained management, commitment, and investment, and involvement and presence, right, in your international operations. I mean, it's, you know, when there's been a few years and the money is slow to come in from a particular market, it can be very challenging to keep rallying.
It's easy to say that actually. I'm just thinking that we've done some work in India, and culturally we find India very difficult. We can find it a very difficult country to work with. China, I find it actually a lot easier. Further east than India. There's a thing about not wanting to lose face, and sometimes you struggle to get the true picture of what's actually going on, and that's difficult. That's actually very, very difficult. That's almost a subjective call because it's just a cultural thing.
I think it's true, though, that you don't have to, to go international doesn't mean you have to address 90 countries all at once. It is very much, choose, focus on one subset of countries, and then probably even break that down further to focus on a particular region or a particular type of customer. If you narrow that, then the task actually becomes a lot easier because it's one change of market, and I suppose it's no different to going into a different state or selling in a way that you would in the US.
You learn what works and can apply it elsewhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do any of you have stories that you'd like to share about mishaps or mistakes or things that you'd advise the audience to avoid? I'm sure everyone's got loads of stories, but.
Unfortunately, a couple people from my company are here, so
we have to edit you out. Or if you don't want to admit any mistakes, what advice?
Okay, I'll kick it forward. You
Seems like a therapy session.
Just another scuff. So I used to work for Sun Microsystems, another global company, and we set up a catalog business across Europe. So we were essentially taking a whole series of add-on third-party products and putting them into a catalog and issuing this out in numerous different countries and different languages. So we'd lay out photography, we'd write this catalog in English, we'd have it translated into French and publish it. And we never, whilst we checked the copy and have it translated, we'd never seen the copy actually linked to the page. So that works fine for French, it worked fine for English, but unfortunately German is a much more wordy language. So it just didn't fit on the page.
A few extra letters.
It's fine.
Yeah.
It was a minor cost in the overall scheme of things. We had to reprint, and it's just looking at, you feel, and particularly living in Europe, you feel that you understand this far more there's still gotchas that cut you out very often.
Any other gotchas?
Come on, let's share.
We had a new branding that was being rolled out, and fortunately, we sent out the cover for the catalog to our sales offices, and the tagline was "A new vision takes root," and apparently root in Australia is a very bad slang term, so we saved ourselves a lot of headaches there, I have a feeling.
So we had a, sorry, no, that's fine.
Now they all come out.
Sorry, just keep that across here, but as we were coming into the States, we'd hired a guy. One of the things you think about doing at some stage, it's not the first thing you do, you might hire somebody to represent you on the ground there. And we hired this guy, it looked great on paper. And basically, as most people should, you give them equipment, etc., get them fully equipped, and something went wrong with this laptop, and it worked its way back to our Boston office for actually to Belfast to be repaired. We had a look at it, and the search engine was basically, he didn't realize that search engine, when you search, there's a trace of it. You know, nuns, sheep, and sex was what he'd been using the search engine for. So we had to kind of move him on. So you place your faith in people sometimes. But I would, to turn that around, I would say that you need to hire really good people. Maybe not positive.
Or ones that understand search engines.
Yeah, one that understands search engines.
Yeah, I mean, another thing which, which really wasn't an error or anything. I mean, when you confront a significant revaluation of a currency, like we did quite a while ago, going to our Korean partners, and basically their money's worth 40% less. And that is actually a really difficult pill to swallow, and a lot of times you're having to make concessions. I mean, that is one of the realities, is you're dealing with volatile exchange rates and a lot of other considerations.
Political changes too.
Political
can
changes,
just
yeah.
Local tax.
Tax. Yeah.
And then natural disasters can always be.
Withholding taxes in Brazil, I still don't know. We spent $5,000 on getting advice on how the tax works in Brazil, and I still don't understand. Our CFO tells me he understands it, so that's good enough for me. It's quite complex.
And just before we close, along those lines, what about technology and different, getting into different countries with different bandwidth issues, really understanding the market that you're going into and what their technology setup can be really important. So does anyone have anything they'd like to share?
I think you have to really look at the technology vector within that country, because we're selling, the growth engine for us has been equipment that interfaces either to an iPad or an Android or a computer, and it is all over the map. If I were to talk to the president of Arequipa in Peru about a cloud-based SaaS model that went to to an iPad or something, he'd look at me like I was from freaking Mars, and he just would say, "No way." And there, you have to be thinking about what those local technology drivers are. That really translates back into also the company, because your company and your development people need to understand those realities, which to me says that we have to do a really good job selling and communicating internally to our product development folks, to where then they can help us respond to those technology drivers in different countries, and not apply the one-size-fits-all.
I would say spend enough time on the ground in the country to understand more about the infrastructure. Spend enough time with your customers and enough time asking questions about their infrastructure. One of the things that we have seen is that there are kind of local hub issues or building specific issues that may come into play as well, where you really do have to optimize what you're doing.
It's not, you can't focus on just one thing. A lack of bandwidth doesn't mean they're not going to have tablets. The tablets, particularly, somebody was telling me yesterday, doing a lot of work in Africa, but basically the tablets are going out, but then coming back into central point, the refurbished, etc. And they're skipping the PC generation. They're just going.
Yeah, no worry.
All right, well, I believe we're out of time. Yes. Thank you very much to the panelists. This was really great, lots of information. Thank you. Sure.